One of the issues that has driven me crazy, and you know it has because you listen to this program on a regular basis, was this issue of how so many people, there were 71 million Americans who believed that Trump was the best for this country and voted for him to be reelected. Or 70 million, something. Thank God 7 or 8 million beyond that on the Democratic side voted no, get the bum out of here. But I've always wondered, how could anyone, especially women, but how could anyone support this son of a bitch? And especially how could people who call themselves Christian? Well, I solved that one by coming up with the solution that works for me. They're fascist Christians. There is a big difference between Christians who follow the teachings as mythology would have them of the rabbi, Jesus of Nazareth, and whether it's mythology or not, there's some good messages there. Sermon on the Mount, some very good messages. So you have on the one hand the Christians who follow that belief, and then on the other hand you have these sick son of a bitches who are Christian fascists. So, no, I'm not going to get into it. But I've often wondered also why so many people buy the big lie that the election was stolen from this filthy, useless bastard, Donald Trump. Well, I turned to Thomas B. Edsall. And as you know, I've gone to him several times. He contributes a weekly column to the New York Times from Washington, D.C., and he covers politics, demographics, inequality. He's an excellent writer. And what attracts me to him is that Edsall, and I do the same thing here, Edsall doesn't necessarily lay out his ideas. Well, I don't do it all the time. Well, no, wait a minute. No, I very seldom do it. What I'm trying to say is Edsall doesn't just pontificate. He uses all sorts of sources, other people, well-known writers or sociologists or professors or people who, journalists, people who have commentaries to make about the state of whatever the topic is Edsall wants to address. And he uses what they have said, in quotes, to bolster his own arguments. Now, yes, I do that sometimes. A lot of times. I will borrow from the news items that get my attention and build my little podcast around that. So on this podcast this evening, I want to refer back to Thomas Edsall. He asked the question, why is Donald Trump's big lie so hard to discredit? That's what drives me crazy. And as he points out, this has been a live question now for more than a year. But inside that question, or inside the lie, lies another question. Do Republican officials and voters actually believe Trump's claim that Joe Biden stole the 2020 election by corrupting the ballots? Now, these were the same ballots that put so many Republicans in office. And if they do believe it, what are their motives? That question has driven me crazy. And Edsall points out that there was a University of Massachusetts, Amherst, this past December, survey about this issue. And the survey found striking linkages between attitudes on race and immigration on the one hand, and disbelief in the integrity of the 2020 election on the other. Okay, there's no surprise there. As far as I'm concerned, only a racist idiot, whether the person would claim their racism or not is immaterial to me. Only a racist idiot would believe that the presidential election had been stolen. According to this poll, anyway, by the University of Massachusetts, 2/3 of Republicans, 66%, agreed with this, quote, the growth of the number of immigrants to the United States means that America is in danger of losing its culture and identity, end quote. 66% of Americans believe that. And the same percentage of Republicans are convinced of this, quote, the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate with voters from poorer countries around the world. End quote. Son of a bitch. I mean, that is so difficult for me to try to even process that kind of bullshit. It really is. Anyway, following up on that University of Massachusetts survey, 4 political scientists, I don't need to name them, wrote in an essay posted online at the Washington Post's site called The Monkey Cage. And this is what they wrote. This is a little part of what they wrote. This is the first quote. These are from the 4 political scientists. Divisions over racial equality were closely related to perceptions of the 2020 presidential election and the Capitol attack. For example, among those who agreed that white people in the United States have advantages based on the color of their skin, 87% of them believed that Joe Biden's victory was legitimate. Among neutrals, 44% believed it was legitimate. And among those who disagreed, only 21% believed it was legitimate. Now, let me pause for a second. What they believed or didn't believe was that white people in the United States have advantages based on the color of their skin. Okay? And of the people who said, that's not true, only 21% of them believed that Biden's victory was legitimate. Back to the quote. 70% of people who agreed that white people enjoy advantages considered the events of January 6th to be an insurrection. Okay? 70% of those of us like me and you who know that white people enjoy advantages because of the color of our skin, we also, at the rate of 70%, consider the events of January 6th to be an insurrection. Okay. 26% of neutrals described it that way, and only 10% of the people who said, no, white people don't have an advantage, only 10% of them did so. 80% of the people who will not acknowledge that white people have an advantage, 80% of that group called it a protest. And while 70% of those who agreed that white people enjoy advantages blamed Trump, like I do, like you do, for the events of January 6th, only 34% of neutrals did. People say, well, I don't know if white people have advantages or not. Maybe, maybe not. That's a neutral. And only 9% of all the millions of people who said, white people have advantages, I don't have any advantages, only 9% of them agreed. These kinds of survey numbers, for me, and probably for you, put into sharp relief what is really going on in this country and how incredibly divided and shipwrecked we are where it concerns the issues of race. This is not to be unexpected. I have read from sociologists in a country that at one time had 3 races, one of which was the victim of attempted genocide, one of which was forced into enslavement, and one of which dominated the other 2, in fact, was the race that tried to eliminate all the members of one race and enslave all the members of another. It's not unusual when you have the dominant race in that triad say, what? What are you talking about? I didn't, what? Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. For the time to come when Caucasians in this country are an actual numerical minority is, it's not even on the charts right now, is it? But I digress. Let me stick with Edsel. He then says, some maintain that another rationale underpinning submission to the lie is that it signals loyalty to the larger conservative cause. In other words, if you just go along with the lie, it means you're a loyal conservative. A sociologist at Columbia pointed out in an email that acceptance of Trump's lies gives Republican politicians a way of bridging the gap between a powerful network of donors and elites who back free trade capitalism and the crucial block of white working class voters who are seeking trade protectionism, the two are polar opposites, and continued government funding of Social Security and Medicare. So the sociologist at Columbia, Musa Al-Gharbi, writes this, quote, embracing the big lie is an empty approach to populism for a lot of these politicians. It allows them to cast their rivals and the system itself as corrupt in order to cash in on that widespread sentiment and to cast themselves as exceptions to the rule. It allows them to portray themselves as allies of the people, but without actually changing anything in terms of the policies they advocate for, in terms of how they do business. End quote. So what this sociologist from Columbia is trying to explain to me and you is that, yeah, if these politicians embrace Trump's big lie, it allows them to cast everybody else as being corrupt, including the system. So vote for me, these white Christians will tell you, vote for me and everything will be okay, which is bullshit. Now, I can agree with all of this, but I still am left, not Madsell, but Mike. I'm still left with the full and certain belief that anyone who does what these people have laid out so far in this essay are worse than useless cowards. They are enablers of the destruction of democracy in this country. I don't care what their rationale is. They're gutless. They're cowardly son of a bitches who see Trump as the demon that he is, but they won't do anything because they're afraid. Afraid of what? Well, afraid of the voters who will throw them out of their offices. It's all based on this sick goddamn fear, which means that the people who own this fear, who possess this fear, are cowardly completely. They're just total cowards. That's why I refer to these schmuck fuckers who run around with their little pretend military uniforms on and the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers or the QAnon assholes. That's why I always refer to them as cowards, because that's what they are. They're afraid of their own goddamn shadows. They don't have the courage or the strength of character to say, okay, I'm going to change the system. I'm going to stand for office. Oh, fuck no. It's much easier, isn't it, bully boys, to come across like you're some big badass son of a bitch and try to scare and intimidate people. And if you arm yourselves like some of you schmucks did, well, then you can engender real fear inside, let me think. I know the members of Congress, when they're there to certify an election, you can make them all run and hide. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.